Business. Bonjour. Welcome. Good morning to everyone. Welcome to our November monthly meeting. Great to have you here.
We're going to get started in just a minute. Okay, so again, we are very pleased to be here with you for our November 18th monthly meeting. And I'm going to hand over to my co-chair, Rosa, to start the program.
Thank you very much. Welcome to everyone. Again, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, tell us where you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from everyone in the chat, very active. Today's program is going to be wonderful. We are going to have a quick update from the YLYP program and then go into updates related to the NGO forum and co-chairs updates. And then we have a fantastic program about mobilizing men as partners for gender equality and social transformation. But to start off, I am going to invite Emily Van Vleck and Mads Minower to provide a quick update about our Youth Leaders and Young Professionals program, YLYPs.
Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure if Emily is here right now, but I'll go ahead and take over. My name is Mads. I'm the YLYP co-chair for this year. Super excited to give you all an update on the YLYPs. Hi, Emily. This is my co-chair, Emily. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, or evening, morning, wherever in the world you are joining us from. So lovely to see all of you. We're really excited to be restarting the Youth Leaders and Young Professionals program. So we have our second monthly meeting coming up here in a few weeks on December 2nd. We hope that you're able to join us there. And all of our meetings are recorded and posted on our YouTube channel. So please invite any of the youth and young professionals in your networks to join us. Back to you, Mads.
Yeah, and I will go ahead and send out the registration link for the YLYPs in the chat as soon as I can get to it, and then I will make sure that the YLYP link is also sent in our newsletter and posted on our online calendar. So just be on the lookout. It will be out there. We will be out there. Super excited to start this up again. I hope you enjoy the rest of the program. Thank you.
Thanks, Mads and Emily, and I want to congratulate the both of you for hosting a fabulous kickoff to the YLYPs for 2025, 2026. Was an intergenerational discussion on Beijing Plus 30, and we got rave reviews, so thank you very, very much. Next up, we're going to look at updates from the co-chairs. And I want to start with parallel events. As some of you may know, the parallel event applications opened last Monday for organizations that are members of NGO CSW New York, and they got first pick of the prime locations and times for parallel events for CSW 70, that is from the 9th to the 20th of March in 2026. The parallel event applications will be open until December 5th. Again, first come, first serve. Someone made mention that the slot that they wanted was already taken, and that's what happens with first come, first serve. It opened on November 13th for the general public, and again, everyone is now able to reserve their spot for their parallel events. Once you reserve your spot, you have 2 weeks to make a change or for us to deny your application if it does not fit within our safety and our organizational protocols. We generally are able to approve 99% of the parallel event applications. And so just know that your event is in good hands with NGO CSW New York. Additionally, the applications for the Artisan Fair, which you know is one of our premier events, that application is going to open tomorrow. And we are looking forward to really showcasing the artisans in our community. And as you know, we select the artisan applications from groups that focus on women's issues, and gender issues. So we've seen such beautiful, beautiful handcrafted items over the years. I've gotten so many things. We have rugs from Afghanistan and jewelry from different countries. We have clothing from Japan and African countries, as well as handcrafts from Ukraine and various other countries. It's really a wonderful intercultural event. So we encourage you to please put in your applications, look for the application in your mailbox tomorrow. And I'm going to now ask Rosa to talk about the Second World Summit on Sustainable Development and with an exciting meeting we had yesterday with the Office of the President of General Assembly.
Thank you so much, Pamela. Yes, NGO CSW was active during the World Social Summit, the second conference on social development that the UN has had. We were in Doha, Qatar recently, and our event was focused on leveraging gender parity to address structural inequities. So our first event was a featured event that we had, Mobilizing for Equality, Leveraging Gender Parity to Address Structural Inequities. It supported the 5 commitments of the Copenhagen Declaration for Social Development around achieving equality and equity between women and men, and focused on the 3 pillars of access to justice, financial investment, and diplomacy. It was a really great event. We also co-hosted an event as part of the rebalancing reform, anchoring economic transition policies in social protection systems. The event, Gender Responsive Social Protection and Economic Transformation in a Time of Reform, was co-sponsored with the Feminist Task Force, the Women's Working Group on Financing for Development, supported by the Global Alliance on Care, and the Economic Justice and Rights Action Coalition, of which was convened by UN Women. And we also want to do a shout out to our executive committee member, Jillian D'Souza Nazareth, who was the chair of the committee of the Secretariat for the World Social Summit and the Civil Society Forum. Many, many kudos to Jillian and her team, which developed a wonderful program for civil society, and were able to provide a space for civil society to really showcase our work, including the opening for the Civil Society Forum, which I understand is now featured in the About area of the World's Social Summit website. So kudos to Jillian and to our team, which helped in all of this. One of the speakers for that civil society opening forum was the president of the General Assembly, Annabelle Baerbock, which you know is the 5th only the fifth female PGA that we've had at the UN. And what we've done since then is requested a meeting with the PGA, which we had yesterday. She was in Belém, Brazil, for the UNFCCC meeting, the COP30 meeting, but we met with her staff. It was a brilliant meeting. In fact, we even went over our allotted time. But just to highlight very quickly, as part of our update, some of the points that we covered. Certainly, we covered the UN80 reform process, of which the PGA is facilitating. We spoke about some of those priorities, and what came out of it was that they want to remind us and ensure that civil society, that women feminist organizations, in all our diversity, continue to be engaged and involved in these processes, not only the UN80 reform process and certain points related to that. Our focus is on the gender equality architecture, the proposals there to merge UN Women with UNFPA, the proposal to create a center of excellence for the women, peace, and security mechanisms. And so those two priorities are the ones that we're focused on. And they have emphasized that we need to continue to be involved and engaged in that process. Another process that they mentioned is the selection of the next Secretary General. That is something that the PGA is also involved with in facilitating. Again, the importance of civil society advocacy was repeated by the PGA staff. They want to hear voices from the ground, grassroots voices. They want to hear our stories. They want us to be solution oriented. And they mentioned that, one way that they engage with civil society is through the PGA Town Hall, which they are organizing on an upcoming one. And we will ensure that we provide that information, as well as, they're bringing it to us as well. So we encourage everyone and let people know they are hearing us and they want to hear more. Let's continue to stay engaged. Let's continue to organize and continue to bring those stories from the ground. Pamela, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, because it was a really good meeting and we're just bringing you the highlights.
I think those were the highlights. Thank you.
Wonderful. So before we go into the panel, we just want to center ourselves. I know we used to do this at the beginning of the meeting, but we want to bring in this element of self-care for us. So we ask that you just center yourself, either close your eyes or, meditate on a certain spot. I want to guide us just through some breathing exercise and focusing our energy exercise that I learned through my Tai Chi practice. If we can all mute, please. So I ask that you take 3 deep breaths. You can do this either standing up or sitting, but just reach with your hands and bring up your energy from the ground, from Mother Earth. Just bring in the energy with the movement of your hands. And now we're going to center that energy in our upper dantian, which is one of our energy points, the third eye. Just breathe in and focus. This is our wisdom center. And bring in now into our middle dantian, which is our heart center, center of love. And now bring in energy just below our belly button to our lower dantian, which is a center for health and life. And just close by doing the shape of a heart over you. And that also brings goodness and wellness and centering to our chi. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa, for that. I think that we all, whether we realize it or not, are under so much pressure in our day-to-day lives that really has helped. I feel relaxed and ready for the next 24 hours. Thank you so much. All right. So we are very pleased to be with you this morning for this special program. So thank you for joining us for this really important discussion. Today, we're coming together to explore one of the most urgent and evolving frontiers in the gender equality movement, and that is transforming male allyship from performative solidarity into genuine partnership rooted in accountability, shared leadership, and structural reform. Across communities, institutions, and global policymaking spaces, we've seen a growing willingness among men to speak out for gender equality. But as many of us know, statements of support, while welcomed, they are only the beginning. Real allyship requires action. It requires ceding space, sharing power, confronting harmful norms, and working collectively to dismantle the systems that perpetuate inequality. The session that we're hosting today is designed to help us understand what truly effective male allyship looks like in practice, and our participants will share evidence-based approaches and lessons learned from community organizing, policy reform, workplace transformation, and multilateral advocacy. We aim not only to highlight what has worked, but to examine what still needs to change and how men can be activated as co-leaders, not bystanders, in the movement for gender justice. Our discussion today has three core objectives. First, to highlight effective models of male allyship that advance gender equality and directly challenge discriminatory norms and institutional bias. Second, to identify concrete pathways for engaging men and boys as co-leaders in feminist movements and broader social transformation. And third, to generate accountable recommendations for agencies, governments, and civil society to strengthen inclusive, accountable, and durable partnerships for gender justice. This is a space today for honest reflection, collective learning, and bold ideas. We want you to engage deeply, to think critically about the presentations that we're going to hear, the conversation that we're going to participate in, and the roles men can play and that they must play and to help shape the strategies that we need to move from good intentions to lasting change. So now we're going to begin with our illustrious panel. With us, we have Wessel Vandenberg from Equimundo, Jennifer Bruno from Men Engage, and Francesco Marola from UN Women's He for She campaign. Welcome to all three of you, and thank you for being here. And we're going to start with a 5 to 7 minute overview from each of our panelists on their work. And we're going to move from those presentations into an interactive discussion. And we'll start with Wessel. Welcome.
Thank you so much for the invitation, NGO CSW. Thank you for the opportunity, Pamela, and for the emails. And I have to admit, in my transit and travel, I was not very good in responding to emails. So I really appreciate the grace to join still, even though I responded very lately. My name is Wessel van den Berg, and I use he, his pronouns. I'm based in Cape Town, South Africa, and I work for Equimundo Center for Masculinities and Social Justice. I do have some slides that I'd like to share. So if I could just be made a co-host to be able to share some of my screen, that would be great.
I'm sorry we're not sharing screens. We had a Zoom bomb and we have had to disable all. Yeah, that would have been part of our bigger conversation.
Okay, no, that's fine, no problem. I can definitely certainly just speak without the visual aids. I would like to share a URL later in the chat, or at least tell people what to Google, because there is quite a useful resource that we have put out quite recently on the manosphere. And I'm going to focus in my conversation on what the manosphere means, what's emerging in our data on the manosphere, and particularly to speak about how men are engaging in their online lives. So, for example, in our State of America's Men report that we did in 2023, 65% of the men who responded from the US agreed with the statement that no one really knows me as a man. And in addition to that, 48% of them said that their online lives are more engaging and rewarding than their offline lives. So there is a really strong engagement online. And what we're seeing more and more is that that is accompanied by and associated with increasing anti-democratic sentiments and increasing polarization and increasing association with quite misogynistic and often sexist narratives. And sadly, we've seen in some of the data, for example, where we've asked some of the participants on agreement with the statement, a man should always have the final say about decisions in his relationship or marriage, that of the men surveyed in the US, the percentage who agreed with that statement has increased from 2017 to 2023 to 2025, up to 42% of the respondents in the most recent survey. And that's very concerning. So on the one hand, we're seeing this increasing importance of online life, of the online lives of men. On the other hand, we're seeing very clear data showing a rise in conservatism, a rise in quite harmful perceptions around gender equality. So what we've also realized is that the way online narratives are organized, it goes by a very particular playbook. There is a very deliberate strategy that we've observed to find the men who feel that they are in crisis, to build a community around their experience of victimhood, and then to use that as an entry point for quite deliberate indoctrination with quite sexist and harmful narratives. But, you know, when we look at why boys, why young men, why men go online, it's often for less negative reasons, for less nefarious reasons. We also just released a report from the UK called The State of UK's Men. It was launched on Friday. And interestingly enough, The top reason that men and women actually go online is firstly to have fun or for entertainment, for streaming, but then secondly for information about the world, and to learn more about what's happening in the world, to find community, to express ideas. And then only right at the bottom of our scale, we see for advice on dating and how to, in inverted commas, get men or get women to go out with me. But very often, particularly young boys, want to learn more about health, about their bodies, about how to navigate this world of complexity. So, in the last minute or so that I have, just to give some indication of how we are responding and how some of our partners around the world are responding to this, there's two projects that I'd like to mention. The first one is a wonderful project called the Young Men and Media Collective that we are co-hosting in collaboration with Movember. It is a funded competition online for pro-social content that focuses on masculinities, that we could support search engine optimization for so that it could be receiving as much attention or more attention, hopefully in some cases, than much of the negative content that we see. On the other hand, there's a report you can easily find it on Ecomundo's website, which covers all of this in great detail. And the report is called The Manosphere Rewired. We also have a fantastic interactive website that gets the data across in a very friendly and accessible way. So those are the two resources, hopefully as a glimmer of hope for things that we can do about this. And let me pause there as I go into 6 minutes. Thank you so much, Pamela.
Russell, thank you so very much for that information. And the two reports, I don't know if you would have links to them, but it would be fantastic if we would be able to access them and be able to use them as resources. It's interesting to note that people go online for very benign reasons, and somehow it gets turned around. So I think that's something that we need to be aware of. I'm thinking about my grandson, to be honest with you, and the dangers. He goes online to play games, and then what happens? So thank you very much. Let's move on now to Jennifer from Men Engage. Jennifer, the mic is yours.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here. And of course, thank you as well for the invitation to NGO CSW for this conversation. And I'm Jenny. I work for the Men Engage Alliance Global Secretariat as Advocacy Manager. And I thought maybe to get started, it might be good to introduce who we are, what we do. Men Engage Alliance is a decentralized social change network. And we gather around 1,100 organizations and individuals across 92 countries, and 6 regional networks and 42 country networks. And we work on ending GBV, including technology-facilitated gender-based violence, SRHR for all, dismantling militarized masculinities, and mobilizing men for feminist peace, and care and economies of care, climate justice, and LGBTIQ rights. And as an alliance, we gather many academics, activists, advocates, practitioners working on men and masculinities around the world, bringing together a substantial thought leadership and field building function to this work. Including by sharing evidence-based frameworks and principles and practices from over 20 years of organizing as Men Engage, and really honing in on learning what works and what doesn't, within this work to engage men and boys. And our mission, which I believe we all share here in this call today, is that dismantling of unequal power relations and patriarchy, for achieving gender, climate, and social justice for all. And us particularly, we seek to do that by adding value to this collective struggle through the particular lens of transforming patriarchal masculinities and dismantling those rigid and harmful gender norms around masculinities and what it means to be a man, and by engaging men and boys in that common aim. And just to give a little context, like maybe pulling back a little bit on this work, is to share that this work is not new. This work started many decades ago by grassroots feminist organizations. And also, when we're looking over the last couple decades, we have seen an increased uptake of this work by UN agencies, governments, development agencies, and civil society organizations. And we've seen a shift, no, in the narrative from the why, because there is broad recognition of the critical role of working with men and boys and these efforts to achieve gender justice, to very specifically the how. What are the guiding principles in politics through which we should do this work in order to ensure it's supporting that collective aim of dismantling patriarchy and not inadvertently causing harm? And so, just to share maybe some of those guiding principles, because I think they speak so much to what this conversation is centering on today. No, it's not just doing the work, but doing it well and making sure it's transformative. We believe in advancing intersectional feminist approaches for working with men and boys and to transform patriarchal masculinities that are also gender transformative. So, whose central aim is to disrupt and end patriarchy and unequal power relations, and not merely to engage men and boys as a constituency, or to check a box. And we also believe in feminist systems change, which is very important and quite something to stress, no, in the conversation today. It's working beyond just men and boys as individuals. That is no longer enough towards the shifting of institutions and ideologies and systems and getting men and boys on board to be part of that, no? So I think that's quite important. And we also believe in the inherent capacity, no, and shared stake of men and boys to supporting this vision for gender, social, and climate justice, and that they can stand up to denounce and challenge patriarchal norms and fully develop their capacities for empathy and care and peace and becoming agents of change and shifting systems. And of course, as you mentioned, Pamela, a central pillar of the work that we do is accountability. No, this work should never stand alone and should always be done in deep consultation and articulation with feminists, LGBTIQ, youth, and other marginalized movements. And I do plan on sharing quite some resources that I'll be speaking to today. So please look out for those. And one of them is our accountability standards and guidelines, which have been developed through over a decade of deep consultation, recognized by the OHCHR as a promising practice in the field. And this delineates in depth, this contribution that the Alliance has made to this dialogue on accountability, on what does that really look like in practice, a deep dive of what are the principles for upholding accountability within the Alliance, within ourselves, and articulating as movements out in the world. And finally, a core principle that we have is to aim to decolonize our work, our practices, ourselves, our minds, our hearts. And that's quite important too. And just to share as I'm reaching time, like how do these principles get put into practice? As I mentioned, we have so many members doing such rich work across a variety of themes, and yet maybe I'll focus today a little bit on the policy level. And we have developed quite a robust set of tools, to support policymakers and others working from national, regional, and global level, and ensuring that the efforts that they do at a policy level can adhere to these principles. We developed a methodological tool to assess if policies that include work to engage men and boys are actually aligning to intersectional feminist approaches throughout the entire policy cycle. And we reviewed policies from around the world to see if that had been done, receiving some interesting results, really with none having fully achieved the implementation of feminist policymaking when that was including work with men and boys, really showing quite some work that can still be done towards achieving that aim, also seeing some policies that were both promoting a gender transformative framework and at the same time also putting forth quite a paternalistic framing, so some beneficial and some harmful elements within the same policy. We've also developed, for example, 10 policy recommendations for policymakers on lessons learned from effective and transformative work with men and boys for sustainable gender equality. What should they begin to think about if they want to develop a policy on engaging men and boys, and what have we learned? No? We also recently released a policy document evaluating feminist foreign policies and how those that have included elements of engaging men and boys are doing, no? So assessing that. So we will be sharing that in follow-up. And maybe one last point is that we're beginning quite an ambitious, no, and exciting initiative to develop a methodology for how to work with men in positions of power. And we know men hold disproportionate power as gatekeepers in politics, religion, media, business, and really wanting to see how can we develop a transformative methodology for working with men in positions of political power as agents of change within those institutions. This is an effort that we're doing in deep consultation with members, with feminists, LGBTIQ, and other partners, and policymakers themselves. Really assessing a gap, perhaps, no, and many efforts to try to do so, but really landing on something that can be transformative and not a one-off activity, no? What can we do to really ensure that men in positions of power begin to understand their key role as agents of change and shifting the systems, not just as individual actors, no? Understanding more about their own gendered nature and masculinities, but really beginning to do part of that work of systems change, which of course is in deep consultation and accountability with movements, no? Maybe I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jenny. That was fantastic. Looking at disrupting the the um, the way that we've been colonized, to look at the relationship between men in power and women, and then looking at how do we decolonize our minds. I love that whole concept, and we do hope that you put the links in the chat for the policy recommendations and the robust set of tools that you mentioned that can help policymakers. Because what we know is that we take the information we get at these meetings and we try to apply them locally. Because to have a global outlook is fantastic, but it has to be done on the ground. The work has to happen in each of our locations. So thank you very much. And now, and as the cliche says, certainly last but not least, we will have the presentation from Francesco Barola from UN Women, He's for She campaign. Francesco.
Hi, everyone. And again, I wanted to thank NGO CSW and Pamela for the opportunity to join you today. I'm very excited to be part of this panel conversation with all of you. So my name is Francesco. I'm based in Rome, and I've been working with UN Women as a partnerships analyst for over 4 years now, specifically working with He for She initiative. And in my role, I'm managing the partners of the He for She Alliance. In these 5 to 7 minutes, maybe I will provide some background information on how He for She operates, both with community level and with our institutional partnerships through the Alliance. So, as some of you may know, He for She was launched in 2014 by UN Women at the UN General Assembly. And He for She is UN Women's flagship initiative that aims to engage men and boys as active allies and agents of change in achieving gender equality and transforming patriarchal masculinities. Since its inception, he for she has made some important global progress to raise awareness and action on male allyship for gender equality. And this has been done through diverse global campaigns, which have reached over 1 billion people and sparked over 3 billion online conversations annually. The movement and the work we've been conducting in the past more than a decade now has inspired educational programs, advocacy efforts, and collective action that leverage the He for She platform to promote equitable masculinities and promote structural change to transforming patriarchal norms. An integral part of the He for She movement is the He for She Alliance, which is a consortium of global leaders from government, private sector, civil society, and universities who work for transformational and institutional change for sustained gender equality. These leaders who are at the highest level of representation in their sectors and institutions, so usually presidents and the CEO levels, are known as He for She champions, and they join this alliance of the willing and commit to create essentially tangible and measurable impact for women and girls in their organizations and in the communities that they serve. This is done through enacting bold policy change, resource allocation for gender equality, as well as through public advocacy. Annually, these champions and these organizations publicly report to us on their progress on achieving their commitments that they made for gender equality and for transformative change. And we publish these reports on our He for She website. I can also share the link to the latest one, which was recently released in September of this year. This multi-stakeholder partnership model, which is essentially rooted into accountability, ensures that commitments are translated into impact and results for women and girls, where we ensure that the progress of our partners is tracked, gender data is made visible and publicly available, and therefore leaders are held responsible for delivering on the results and the pledges they've made when joining the alliance. Speaking about results, we have seen this model to be an effective one. There have been some consistent year-on-year progress for women and girls as a consequence of this He for She work from our partners, who have created, in general, more inclusive workplaces and communities. For example, collectively as an alliance in 2024 alone, 38% of our He for She champions have increased overall female representation in their companies. 50% have increased female representation within senior leadership positions, and 14% have increased the percentage of women in their board of directors. By making workplaces more inclusive, therefore, He for She champions are helping to ensure that women advance in sectors that have been traditionally dominated by men, with ripple effects for example, pay equity, career mobility, and structural inclusions, which are all individual results we're seeing from our partners. Again, in 2024 alone, the He for She Alliance as a whole reached a total of nearly 40 million people, including 1.24 million direct beneficiaries, who are indeed primarily women and girls, who have gained access to digital support services, STEM education, economic empowerment opportunities, support on GBV and domestic violence and abuse, amongst other things. Financially, the Alliance has also committed substantial resources to gender equality, with again, in 2024, more than $34 million have been directed in direct investments for gender equality objectives, and around $2.59 billion in gender-focused lending, particularly benefiting women and girls across the continent of Africa. And these funds support programs like women's entrepreneurship, STEM education, again, digital access, and other things like gender equality in sports. Importantly to mention, this financing does not go directly to UN Women or is not channeled directly through UN Women, but it is invested directly by our he for she partners to fulfill their commitments under the alliance, and it is done so by investing in their gender equality work or financing other women-led and feminist-led NGOs organizations in the communities where they are operating in. This is just to say how he for she is truly with UN Women. He for she acts as a partner for change to ensure that these highly level leaders and organizations are influenced in driving their resources, their focus, and their attention on gender equality initiatives and work. I'll quickly conclude. I think I'm at time, so I just wanted to conclude by saying that with UN Women with he for she shows that when men in positions of power commit to change and are held accountable, real institutional change can be achieved, and progress does happen for women and girls. And again, I will share our impact report in which you can see more detailed impact on women and girls that our partners and the alliance have generated. And also that when women, we engage men and boys because, as also my colleagues have said, gender equality requires everyone to help dismantle the patriarchal systems we're living in. And this for us is really important to mention. It's not shifting focus away from women, but again, expanding the responsibility and sharing the responsibility. Through he for she, we do make sure that men in positions of influence use their power to support women's rights, to challenge harmful norms, and help build more equal and just institutions as a whole. And yeah, so I'll stop here. I think I'm a bit over time, and thank you again for the opportunity to participate.
Thank you so much, Francesco, for that wonderful overview. It's reassuring to know that UN Women. Can you hear me? Okay, good. I got a message that my system crashed. I'm sorry. But it's reassuring to know that UN Women is really on the forefront of making sure through he for she that we are able to dismantle, or that we're working to dismantle these patriarchal institutions that are really working against women and girls. So I thank the three of you for your presentations, and now we'd like to go right into our questions. And so with the first question, I'd like to pose it to the three of you. And how can we move men from general support for gender equality to active engagement in transforming discriminatory institutions and norms? And I think that each of you in some way touched on it, but let's dig deeper and really look at this question. And the one that answers first gets a special prize.
Then I'll offer myself.
Thank you, Francesco.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Pamela, for this question. And speaking from UN Women's and he for she's experience, we've seen that there are perhaps three key strategies that I'd like to elaborate on how we can move men from general support for gender equality to be active agents of change in transforming the discriminatory practices. The first is to educate and help men understand that a passive stance towards injustices and towards gender discrimination is not a neutrality stance, but one that actually reinforces the inequalities. So many men we've seen in their work that we're conducting in our communities or with our employees, with our partners, have say that they do support gender equality, but they do stay silent or neutral in the face of injustices and discrimination. And therefore, we as he for she, try to support men in understanding that they need to recognize that doing nothing is not, neutral, as I was saying, but it actually maintains the status quo. The second important let's say strategy is to provide men with the appropriate and adequate tools and instruments to become actually active allies for gender equality and not just passive bystanders. So again, we've seen that many men support gender equality in practice, but then they do not how to act in theory, and especially how to do so perhaps without overstepping or on women's voices and spaces. And therefore, it is essential that we equip them with the practical and concrete ways to speak up, to challenge bias and create and ways for them to create policy changes that actually implement the change that we are driving for. And finally, we've seen through, as I mentioned in my presentation, through the alliance model, that embedding accountability into male allyship practices turns commitments into tangible impact for women and girls. As when men are held accountable for their commitments, then that we can see that they become answerable for the results, and not just, as you mentioned in the beginning, Pamela, for their beliefs or the rhetoric or the words that can be said without actual implementation. I just want to conclude by mentioning how we do this in practice at He for She. So my colleagues have been talking about some very essential tools, and yes, and responding to your question also, Jane. So we have developing over the past decade on various tools and resources for communities, workplaces, and universities to help men take meaningful actions for gender equality. And an example of a recent tool that we've actually just launched or relaunched in September of this year is the Barbershop Toolkit 2.0. Which builds on the original 2017 toolkit created in partnership with the government of Iceland. And the barbershop framework basically is a tool that creates safe spaces for men to reflect on gender, power, and on privilege, and how these affect women and girls in their communities. And it is designed to help men move from belief in equality to action and true accountability. It is designed to train men to speak up, to change policies where discriminating women, and to support women's leadership without, again, taking over. This updated toolkit has an important element of intersectionality and inclusion, and it's structured around 10 modules with again an intersectional and inclusive approach, focusing on different areas such as including men in leadership, including how to work with and engage bystander men. It looks at sexual reproduction, health and rights, intersectionality, climate change, various topics which are of main concern for today. And it has facilitator guides and support for guides to lead these sometimes difficult conversations with men in an open, frank, and critical way. Yeah, I'll stop here. Sorry for taking some time.
Thank you, Jennifer or Russell. Would you like to jump in?
Thanks, Pamela. I'll also respond to the very useful question. I really appreciate that. I think, firstly, really being able to, so just moving from the general to the specific, and moving from general commitment in words to actions. One approach that we've used is to be really clear about what the positive contribution is that men are making or can make, in addition to first calling out harm and identifying where harm should stop. So we've done a lot of work on promoting men's engagement in care, but also identifying where men are already engaged in care. I just returned from Iceland from the Reykjavik Global Forum, and a wonderful new film has been produced about the day that Iceland stood still when all of the women in Iceland went on strike from unpaid care work and from paid work. And the men simply had to make do without women doing all of this unpaid care work in the country. And that laid a very crucial, deep foundation for gender equality in the country. Um, and I think one of the institutions that since severely needs transformation is the household and the home, where much of the invisible labor happens. And I think simply assigning men the role to take care of a child, to take care of a household, and leaving them to do that. Our colleagues in the Netherlands call this solo parenting. Really grounds that activity. And I've learned from my own experience that takeaways and laundry you need to eventually get to actually doing the work after 4 days. You can only get by. So any recommendation to leaving a trustworthy man in charge of children, do it for more than half an hour or an evening, but do it for 3 or 4 days. That's when the work really lands. And then just I'll post a link here to a wonderful resource that colleagues have produced with a United Nations Global Compact on making male allyship a reality in business. It's an e-learning course that UNGC is hosting with us. It's based on some of the tools like the barbershop toolkit that we had developed earlier with Iceland. There's a wonderful set of resources available there. I think the final point I wanted to say is just that the barbershop toolkit, for example, is one tool that gives access to conversations in places of power by bringing in male politicians, for example, to understand the role that they can play, not just to, in their personal life, make a difference, but also through our policy decisions, have a really important impact on how policy is defined. In other words, to make care a public good through policy decisions. So those are some of the actions that come to mind when I think about our work, and really pleased to talk more. Let me pass the microphone to Jenny.
Thank you so much, and for what's already been shared by the both of you to respond to this in agreement. And maybe I would just add, it is a journey, no? I mean, we're in many ways seeking to have a deep internalization of these feminist principles, of these a deep understanding of yes, of course, men and boys' own gendered nature, but what's at stake, no, in our common struggle for gender justice, and to move into a tipping point, no, where all of that internalization can work to bring about men stepping up as agents of change, which of course we don't also want men and boys to step up in a way, maybe speaking a little bit to what you mentioned, Pamela, in a way that overtakes no gender equality efforts either. So that deep internalization is very important because again, then the how to be an agent of change, where yes, there is a deep exploration of men and boys' own power and privilege so that we can move towards agents of change that are sharing power, are ceding space, are being helpful no to collective efforts to change institutions and systems, is actually beneficial, no? So I think it's just important to recognize also it is a journey that requires some time, but in agreement, no, with what's already been shared a bit about the how. Thanks.
Jenny, you're muted. I don't know if you were finished.
I was finished. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, I have one more question before we move into the Q&A, and thank you all for those compelling responses to that first question. Each of you brought a different aspect, and we really appreciate it. And I'm asking my staff to please copy all of the links so that with the recording of this meeting, we can send out a list of the links because this is such a wonderful resource that you're a collective resource that you're giving us today. So I was going to ask a question about male voices overshadowing. How do we stop that? I know that even with men who are avowed feminist, the ability to mansplain or to overshadow women comes across very frequently. But I think that because we have such a limited amount of time, I'm going to skip that question and I'm going to go to what was probably more practical. And that is, how can civil society, educators, and policymakers counter the influence of the manosphere and other online spaces that normalize misogyny and undermine gender equality while promoting positive narratives of masculinity and partnerships? And Rose is putting the question in the chat, but if you could respond to that, and then after this, we'll open the floor for questions from the audience.
Maybe I can start. Well, yeah, it's such an important question, no? As we're, of course, witnessing such a powerful rise of anti-gender, anti-rights backlash from national to regional to global level, including within the United Nations, no? That I think we are all organizing around. And maybe just to start off by saying that patriarchal masculinities are deeply implicated in the anti-rights backlash. Uh, Not only do they serve as the emotional fuel, but also the logic base, no? Under which patriarchal masculinities sustain, right? Anti-gender ideologies, narratives, strategies. Men and boys are often the primary targets and enforcers of anti-gender ideologies and far right movements, anti-gender movements are actively appealing to men and boys, right, as a key target of their aims, especially those feeling disempowered and capitalize, no, on those feelings of isolation and dislocation in a changing world. So without like active engagement to counter those narratives, no, they can continue to gain momentum. We've been working on this with a collective of partners, no? Feminist, LGBTIQ youth partners called the Men, Masculinities, and Countering Backlash Collective, where we've come together to really think through how can we contribute some thinking on this particular lens on the links between masculinities and the rising backlash, and have developed actually a fact sheet, 10 recommendations for engaging men and boys encountering the backlash. I'll share it now in the chat. That really lays out some of the key strategies for any civil society movements, academics, policymakers who are trying to understand better what this link is and what strategies we can put forward to specifically engage men and boys in countering this trend. And of course, as you point out, Pamela, a huge component of this is also working on shifting narratives, no? What are we, it's not just countering the backlash, what are we offering as an alternative? It's a central strategy within this document, but this was developed particularly to meet the moment and to also clarify, no? What are those strategies that we can advance in order to do so? Thanks so much. I'll leave it there and pass it on to any of the other panelists.
Thanks, Jenny. I'll come in briefly. And just to be very practical, our colleagues came up with a phrase to move from the URL or the website to IRL or in real life. So to move from the URL to the IRL. And to be frank, my experience with my son, who's 9 years old now, is that he doesn't really distinguish between in real life and online. He moves between the two seamlessly with the same friends. And I've learned that in addition to trying to reduce screen time, which I've miserably failed at, to join him in his online life and to get to know the spaces that he occupies in that space so that we can have a conversation about it, we can share it together. So simply really thinking about, as parents, how do we spend time with our children in addition to shooting hoops, kicking a ball around, playing around in the garden with a dog, to also join them in the Roblox game they're playing or to watch the YouTube video that they're watching, in addition to trying to reduce screen time overall, as a basic rule. We've worked with an organization called Next Gen Men to build a Roblox game that is running, and it's up and it's live. I'll put the link in the chat. That is an obstacle course, and the obstacles are harmful gender norms. So it's a fun way for children to really navigate this in a very interactive way. And then a second resource that's quite child friendly or particularly teenage friendly is about looks maxing, or what young boys are often pulled into in order to try and ramp up their musculature and their physical appearance, in order to it's one of the entryways into the manosphere. So we've generated a animated video with an organization called Amaze that counters some of that and really unpacks it for children at a developmentally suitable level. So that would be also a practical suggestion that I would make, is simply to generate resources as organizations that are occupying the space that we are trying to change. Thank you.
And Francesco.
Yes, thank you. I'll jump in quickly. So I just wanted also to mention that this is a topic which we at He4She Women have been focusing specifically with deep focus this year. So some of you may know we do host annual He4She summits during the UN General Assembly in September. And this year specifically, we had our summit focus on countering online tech-facilitated violence and the rise of misogyny. And through these conversations and the work we've been conducting with experts and our partners, He4She is focusing on let's say, produced two strategies to counter the rise of the manosphere. One is something which also Jennifer touched upon at the end of her intervention. So it's how can we fill in this spaces that online masculinity influencers are occupying, and in which they are perpetuating gender stereotyped norms and traditional views of masculinities and harmful ones. We have seen through a recent study which our partner Team Lewis has conducted on behalf of He4She, which we released on International Women's Day, that 80% of Gen Z and 76% of millennials are concerned about the sexist rhetoric on social media and are asking policymakers to intervene. Therefore, we do think that these online masculinity influencers are quite a very loud and well-structured minority, but there is resistance also from wider public to counter these spaces. And importantly, one way is to offer the other side of the coin. So what it means, as I was saying, to be a positive model for equitable masculinities. And what He4She has been doing and has been launching since last year in 2024 is that we've developed a men's narrative series in which we are highlighting the personal stories of male allies who are breaking stereotypes and taking real action for gender equality within their communities and their spheres. And we are promoting these through our online content on our social media channels to offer this counter narrative. And to basically, to offer an alternative narrative to online influencers. The second one, I'll be very quick, is more maybe focused on a recommendation focused for institutional change makers and governments. So again, International Women's Day of last year, He4She Alliance champions issued a joint open letter against gender-based tech-facilitated violence. And this letter was basically demanding leaders and policymakers to take action as put the whole burden only on the users, but also on the platforms themselves, who, as we know, are designed to amplify divisive content, where the algorithms reward often rage and decisiveness over reason and empathy, and therefore our champions and the alliance have published this letter calling for stronger content moderation policy, transparency reporting, platform risk assessments, and new laws to classify and combat gender-based digital hate, so that then we can also work at an institutional level to actually prevent this content being amplified so much. And I will share both links to what I talked here in the chat, by the way.
Thank you so much. It's important for us to be able to share all of these resources with our constituents. So I'm again asking our interns, Jameson and Mariama, and our office manager, Mads, to make sure that you copy all of these links so that they can be sent out with the recording of today's session, because we have such rich resources that are in the chat. And now it's time for us to, and thank you all. Thank you, the three of you, for your responses to these questions. I'm looking at the clock and we're running out of time, so I'm rushing now. But we're going to start with the question from the chat, and then we'll go on to a hand from our audience. But from the chat, we have Sheila Dallas Katzman, who is a journalist, so you know that her question is going to be quite specific. And I'll read it. What specific roles can men and boys take on as allies, witnesses, and upstanders to interrupt everyday patriarchal behaviors in their own homes, schools, workplaces, and online spaces? And it's open to the three of you. And for those of you in the audience, if you have a question, please raise your hands. Okay. Any responses?
Maybe I can just give a couple. Talking in terms of everyday actions that we can do. So I think it's important also for men on their daily lives to educate themselves in terms of what women's rights movements and feminist movements have been talking about and working on, and the priorities that they're bringing forward in order to align their their work and their voices to these agendas rather than trying to redefine them. So one thing I would definitely say, educate themselves to be able to be positioned in the conversation in a more aware and supportive way. And then, at least in the sense of, for example, I work a lot with institutions and with workplaces. There are a few everyday actions which men can take, which go from the most common that we often talk about. So opening the spaces, especially when you're in position of leaderships, for women to engage in the conversations and but then not to show off about it, or then try to manage the conversation yourself. So it's about stepping up when it's needed, opening the doors when it's needed, but then also yielding the space, yielding the voice, and yielding the time when it's required for you to essentially just give the space and the voice to women to proceed the conversation and be part of decision making. Just a few comments.
Thank you.
From my side, moving on with the theme of care, recognizing care, talking about invisible care work, making it really clear, especially to young children, to girls and to boys, what is care work, and that you recognize it and that you're engaged in it as a man in a household. But then also, as Francesca was saying, in a company, for senior leaders to take time off from work when they become parents to demonstrate parental leave and simply just go for therapy. Really normalize healing and well-being and the fact that all of us need to recover from trauma with some help. So just to say, I think those are all practical actions that one can take.
Thank you. What a wonderful suggestion to admit it and to go for therapy. It's simple. Jenny?
Thanks. Yeah, I think we've already shared much of it, no? But I think it's beginning to learn about power and privilege. And as we say, no, it's not always about what we're learning, but what we need to unlearn, right? Uh, it's, of course, learning, listening from women, LGBTIQ peoples, movements, agendas. I think it's also speaking up, no, holding other men to account. I think it's definitely that accountability piece, and yeah, beginning to take action, no, in an articulated way. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you. I think it all points to what you said earlier, decolonizing your mind, whether you're going to therapy or whether you're listening and learning. All of it is really talking about how do we clear the harmful learned practices that we have internalized. How do we do that? And so all of this is good. We have, I'm going to combine two questions from the chat. I don't see any hands. The first is from Rebecca Shute, and it's can former offenders who have perpetuated harmful norms or behavior be enlisted in countering such narratives? Are there perhaps lessons from transnational justice contexts that may be applicable, relevant? And then I'm going to go down to Ivy Cook's uh, question, and she says we see the need to work with all genders on this issue. However, the CSW space and the feminist women's movement is at least 80% female. This seems to reiterate the idea that working on gender equality is a women's issue. How do we effectively move away from this to see gender equality as humanity's issue, as truly a human rights issue that involves all of us? So please respond to both, either or.
Thanks. Maybe I'll jump in. Appreciative of those comments. And yeah, I think we're reaching no an understanding of this critical moment that we're facing with challenges to democracy, to the climate, to gender justice, and the need no for this deep cross movement building to rise no to meet the moment and the severity of the challenges. So I appreciate what you posted and organizing around this principle of our shared humanity, no, and our shared human struggles. And I think at the same time, also recognizing this accountability piece, no, is there because we've had a history, no, a historic sort of background that still just requires a little bit of the stressing on that, but very much agree, no, especially as I'm mentioning the deep need for articulation amongst all of us to really be able to change the systems at this time, no, is quite important. So just wanted to say that. And then on your point on perpetrators of violence, there's so many of our members working specifically on that, no? And your idea to bring forward some of those voices, no, to be potentially supportive and shifting narratives is quite interesting. Of course, with deep assurance, no, that internalized transformation has taken place. Of course, for the perpetrator, no. But I'll share the link to a couple organizations doing this work where you might be able to get some more guidance, no, on what that work looks like. And but interesting proposal, no, as potentially powerful voices, albeit after the deep transformation is achieved. No, thank you.
Francesco or Russell? And thank you for that response, Jennifer. As always, really on point. Russell or Francesco?
Sure. I think just a lesson learned about the value of restorative justice work. In other words, indeed demonstrating that transformation is possible and that we don't all enter the world as perfect feminists, but that it's a journey to deepen that, and the more we learn, the less we know. So it's a long, deep journey. Um, I do think that it is risky to think that a short, relatively superficial engagement with perpetrators um, is necessarily going to achieve deep transformational change. I do think the evidence that I've read, is at least a 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. It's years that it takes to really achieve a level of personal safety and self-care where one can actually speak with authority about what it means to be transformed. So just to say yes, that is a valuable approach, but it really takes time. And it has to start from personal motivation. There's no way one can motivate another person to do that unless they're willing to do it themselves. So really, really important, but sadly, I think less common than we would want. Thank you.
Thank you. There's no magic bullet. It takes time and patience and desire and commitment. And Francesco, did you want to
Maybe I'll
comment?
yeah, sorry. Maybe I'll just come in quickly on the second question. I think one important way in terms of engaging men who do not want to perhaps be engaged. I think that's what more or less the point of the question is, that we also need to remind ourselves and men when we enter into these conversations that of course patriarchal systems are harming women the most. But does not mean that men, even though they're privileged in these systems, are not being harmed by these stereotyped and regressive gender norms. And therefore, yes, we're doing it especially and mainly, of course, for women and girls, for gender equality. But this does not mean that the work will not also have beneficial effects for men in these spaces, for their autonomy, for their freedom, for their choices, for their well-being. As Bessel was saying, all therapy are all things which men might shy away from, but they're all things which then make you live a happier life. Therefore, also maybe that, obviously always keeping the focus on women and girls, but then also adding that element of personal connection can be a useful way to bring also the conversation forward and entice more men to join when they might be resistant at first.
Thank you. Thank you for those valid points. Very much appreciated. We have time for a short question from Anna, and then we're going to wrap up and close the meeting. So Anna. Okay. It looks like Anna has disappeared. She must have left the meeting. Well, thank you, Russell, Jenny, and Francesco for providing this deeply necessary, deeply compelling conversation. We know that sometimes I feel as though we keep preaching to the choir. We have these meetings and it's the majority women, and we talk about these topics, but we know that we cannot stop violence against women and girls without the help of men. So thank you for helping for providing us some strategies, some resources, and for your own individual care and commitment to this process. And we really need to have this conversation on an ongoing basis, and we need to bring more men so that they can hear about your work and they can hear the strategies, because I've experienced it myself that men listen more to men than they do to us. And so if we want to stop gender-based violence, this has to be one of the strategies. So thank you all. Thank you to our audience. And I'm going to ask my co-chair, Rosa, to be spotlighted so we can end the meeting with our NGO CSW slogan.
Thank you, Pamela. What a wonderful panel. Wow, this has been an incredible morning. I think it's so powerful, considering what some of us in the US have been maybe watching this morning, which is the victims of Jeffrey Epstein urging lawmakers to vote in favor of the release of all the Epstein files. That is happening in the US. That press conference this morning with so many women and men was just so powerful. So thank you to all our speakers. It was a wonderful, wonderful event. And I just want to bring in some information from UN Women. We did not have Vivek Ray, our UN Women liaison. He was unable to attend, but I just want to let our constituency know about the registration that is open for the CSW. I'm putting things in the chat. The accreditation process for CSW, the registration process is open, so that you all know, especially those that need to process this to get your letter to apply for visas to come to the US. And again, we have received the email csw@unwomen.org from our UN Women colleagues. If you have any questions, especially since we don't have the rep today, if you have any questions, please write to them. And I know that they're very, very attentive about all of our questions, especially because our constituency and our work is so important to UN Women. So to end this wonderful meeting, I want us to let's showcase everyone. Let's have the gallery view. Open up your videos, open up your mics, and we are going to do our chant slogan: equality, peace, justice now. I'll say, what do we want? And we say equality, and then we say peace, and we say justice. And now, so we can end with the rallying voice and go on with our day, our evening, our night, totally feeling together and empowered. So, are you ready? What do we want?
Equality,
Justice
Quality.
now, peace,
Peace.
justice now.
justice,
Justice
Justice
now.
and justice.
Let's
Everything.
do it again. What do we
Resilience,
want?
equality,
Everything.
Equality.
Quality.
peace,
equality,
Justice.
justice.
Now.
When do we
Peace.
want it? Now.
Oneness.
Now.
Justice.
Peace.
What do
What
we
do we
want?
want?
Everything.
Equality,
Equality.
peace,
Everything.
Justice
justice.
now.
When do we
Justice.
want it? Now.
When do we want
now.
it? Now.
Now.
Everyone.
Yesterday.
Love and
Adios.
Yesterday.
respect now.
Bye. Thank you to our
Compassion.
speakers.
Goodbye,
Thank
everyone.
you for
Bye.
joining.
Bye.
Bye. Good
Bye.
night, everyone. Adios.
Bye. Very good.
Abrazos.
Bye.